In Louisiana, we have the largest maximum security prison in America, Angola State Penitentiary. It was once known as the bloodiest prison in America, but is now known as the Prison of Hope. I myself have personally had the privilege of speaking with a former inmate, Edwin Jenkins, who had been convicted of murder and served a sentence of 30 years. As he spoke with me on the phone, he began to weep. He told me how truly thankful he was for Angola and how Warden Burl Cain showed him a better way to live, a life free from crime, giving him an education, teaching him skills and trades. Through rehabilitation, Mr. Jenkins has turned his life around. He now has a wife and family and is no longer harming society but living a crime-free and productive life. Because rehabilitation addresses the root problem of why the criminal committed the crime in the first place, I'm advocating that we address the effectiveness of prisons. Specifically, according to Andrew Clark on February 13th, 2018, he says, quote, "State legislatures introduced a bill calling for an analysis on the effectiveness of California's prisons. But Governor Jerry Brown is considering multiple investments in rehabilitation as part of his budget. Assemblyman Tom Lackley, R. Antelope Valley, said Assembly Bill 1929 would require the state's inspector general to evaluate rehabilitation programs and report to the legislature over a 10-year period beginning in July 2019. The budget includes $454.4 million for in-prison rehabilitation programs, compared to approximately $300 million in 2012 and 2013. It is important for the legislature to determine which programs are most effective and to target our resources in a way that will maximize positive outcomes for participating offenders. Lackley said in a statement, "The goal of this analysis is not only to maximize state dollars, but more importantly, to ensure everything is being done to improve the quality of life for those who have served their sentence and are re-entering their communities," end quote. Now, criminals do deserve a punishment for committing a crime against society, but one of the biggest problems inside of a prison system is its recidivism rates. Now, recidivism just means the amount of prisoners that return for another sentence. So the Bureau of Justice Statistics, accessed on June 2017, says, quote, "At least 95% of all state prisoners will be released from prison at some point." So in order to best protect society, we need to address the root problem of why the criminal committed the crime in the first place, because if 95% of criminals are going to get out of prison at one time or another, we need to ensure that they're not going to harm society, but help society. So my next point, 43% lower odds of recidivating with rehabilitation. According to PhD Lois M. Davis and PhD Robert Bosnick on 2013, they say, quote, "Our meta-analytic findings provide additional support for the premise that receiving correctional education while incarcerated reduces an individual's risk of recidivating after release. After examining the higher quality research studies, we found that on average, inmates who participated in correctional education programs had 43% lower odds of recidivating than inmates who did not," end quote. Simply punishing doesn't help to lower recidivism. It doesn't address the root problem, and it doesn't increase public safety. We want criminals that have made mistakes to re-enter society as productive members so that they can help people instead of harm them. The problem is throwing someone in a cell without any guidance to change their behavior doesn't help them to re-enter society as a productive citizen, and many times just creates a smarter criminal. The effectiveness of rehabilitation doesn't just stop at the criminal. It also saves money for the taxpayer. My next point, according to James Gilligan, an adjunct professor of law at New York University on December 19, 2012, he says, quote, "My colleague Brandy Lee and I have shown that an intensive re-educational program with violent male offenders in the San Francisco jails reduced the level of violence in the jail to 0 at a time, for a year at a time. And even more important, participation in this program for as little as 4 months reduced the frequency of violent reoffending after leaving the jail by 83%, compared with a matched control group in a conventional jail. In addition to enhancing public safety, this program saved the taxpayers $4 for every $1 spent on it. since the lower reincarceration rate saved roughly $30,000 a year per person, end quote. Criminals do deserve a punishment, but I'm advocating that we pass Assembly Bill 1929 to analyze the effectiveness of California's prisons and put more resources into developing rehabilitation programs around the country. Now, we can see from these statistics that rehabilitation is effective in reducing recidivism and allows the criminal to give back and be a part of society again. I want to end with this quote from James Gale again. He says, quote, "Generations of research has shown that the more severely children are punished, the more violent they become, as children and as adults. The same is true of adults, especially those in prison. So the only rational purpose for a prison is to restrain those who are violent from inflicting harm on themselves or others, while we help them to change their behavior from that pattern to one that is nonviolent and even constructive, so that they can return to the community."